just found Iran's biggest secret at Hormuz. Then US paratroopers did this. In the tense skies over the Persian Gulf during the first days of April 2026. The United States military pulled back the curtain on Iran's most explosive and closely guarded secret, a sprawling network of fortified radar installations, underground missile silos, and oil export choke points hidden along the Strait of Hormuz. All designed by the fanatical Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps to strangle the world's energy lifeline and ignite a global economic nightmare. What followed was nothing short of a jaw-dropping, high-stakes showdown that exposed the regime's deep-seated hatred for the West and their desperate plot to dominate the region through terror and blackmail. American forces didn't just respond, they struck with overwhelming precision, turning Iran's carefully constructed fortress of hate into a smoking ruin. This operation, codenamed Epic Fury, wasn't about conquest. It was about crushing a tyrannical threat that had been arming proxies, enriching uranium in secret, and threatening to plunge millions into darkness by shutting down the flow of oil that powers American homes, factories, and dreams of a stable future. The world held its breath as US paratroopers, Marines, and elite special operators rewrote history in real time, proving once again that freedom's defenders will never back down from those who sow chaos and division. The assault began with a thunderclap of technological superiority that left Iranian defenders reeling in utter panic. An AGM-88 HARM anti-radiation missile screamed toward the primary search radar at Bandar Abbas at a blistering 1,500 miles per hour, slicing through the night like an avenging angel of justice. These IRGC operators, fueled by decades of anti-American venom and a burning desire to punish the West for their very existence, had no time to react. In exactly 0.4 seconds, the missile's fragmentation warhead detonated with savage force, shredding the multi-million-dollar sensor array into twisted scrap metal. The kinetic impact was so ferocious that the massive radar dish continued spinning wildly, even as it disintegrated, a grotesque testament to the regime's crumbling delusions of invincibility. While the primary system was still collapsing in on itself, a second AGM-88 HARM locked onto the residual heat trail and slammed straight into the facility's hardened power vault, vaporizing it in a blinding explosion that sent shockwaves rippling across the coastal defenses. This wasn't random destruction, it was surgical annihilation of Iran's eyes and ears, the very tools they had used to coordinate hatred-fueled attacks on international shipping and plot their stranglehold on global energy markets. The biggest secret was out a hidden command nexus at Hormuz that the regime believed would allow them to launch a devastating first strike against the free world. High above the chaos at 40,000 feet, an EA-18G Growler electronic warfare jet circled like a digital ghost, unleashing a torrent of high-intensity noise that painted the entire 1st Naval District in an impenetrable blanket of artificial silence. In that heart-pounding void, the jump lights inside the lead C-17A Globemaster III flashed from red to green, and the first wave of the legendary 82nd Airborne Division, the All-Americans, poured out into the darkness. These elite paratroopers, hardened by rigorous training and driven by an unbreakable commitment to protect American interests from regimes that export terror and instability, executed a flawless vertical envelopment. While Iranian commanders scrambled in confusion, their so-called steel ring of defenses reduced to a total information vacuum, thousands of American boots descended from the clouds like a storm of retribution. The 82nd operates on a psychological clock that strikes fear into the hearts of every adversary exactly 18 hours from the moment the order leaves the Oval Office, and they can flood any coordinate on Earth with overwhelming force. In early April 2026, that clock hits zero with devastating finality. Inside the cavernous holds of those C-17 Globemaster, 3 transports, over 2,000 soldiers were packed into modular formations, their gear checked and double-checked with the precision that defines American excellence. They brought everything needed for sustained, 3-dimensional warfare: light, armored vehicles that could roll straight into combat air-deployable artillery, ready to rain fire on enemy positions, and a fully integrated logistical support system that ensured no soldier would fight alone. The C-17S banked gracefully over the warm waters of the Persian Gulf, their massive wings cutting through the night, as the world fixated on empty diplomatic cables. Iran's coastal defenses, manned by IRGC troops, seething with ideological rage, pointed uselessly at the horizon, waiting for a naval fleet that would never come. Instead, America came from above a vertical envelopment that bypassed their static hatred entirely. The 82nd moved in combat blocks of 2,000 to 4,000 soldiers. One blink from the enemy and an entire brigade was boots on the ground. Two blinks and the full 18,000-strong division was reshaping the battlefield. This was modern warfare at its most ruthless and efficient, exploiting the regime's failure to anticipate anything beyond their outdated, ship-focused paranoia. While the 82nd handled the airborne fury, the architecture of silence was maintained by the most advanced sensor fusion platform in existence, the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye. Patrolling at 25,000 feet, this airborne command center acted as the central nervous system of the entire theater. Its AN/APY-9 radar boasted a detection range exceeding 310 miles, the equivalent of sitting in the heart of New York City and tracking every single vehicle crawling through Washington, D.C. The Hawkeye fused data at lightning speed, assigning targets across the kill web with flawless logic. If an Iranian Fate 110 ballistic missile lit up during its boost phase, the system instantly fed telemetry to an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer in the Gulf or a THAAD battery at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. No wasted shots, no hesitation, just pure sequence logic that assigned the most efficient interceptor based on time to impact and kill probability. This technological edge humiliated the IRGC's desperate attempts to fight back, exposing their hatred as nothing more than empty bluster against American innovation. To shield the incoming transports, the E-2D coordinated seamlessly with EA-18G Growlers, performing active masking. These Growlers pinpointed the exact frequencies of Iranian surface-to-air missile batteries like the S-300, then unleashed concentrated bursts of energy that created massive dead zones in the enemy's radar coverage. Through these invisible corridors of safety, the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber glided toward its targets, the slowest asset in the air, but carrying the heaviest punch imaginable. It had already released its payload of GBU-31 JDAM satellite-guided bombs, each one programmed with deadly accuracy to slam into specific bunker vents and radar arrays on the nearby Tonb Islands. By the time the 82nd Paratroopers reached 1,000 feet, the primary threats to their descent had been utterly vaporized in fireballs of precision-guided justice. The enemy's OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act collapsed in total disarray. Iran's commanders blinded by their own rage, and outdated systems could neither see nor respond effectively. If you were one of those ground commanders staring down this overwhelming American onslaught, what would you prioritize first? The capture of critical oil valves to choke the regime's revenue, or the immediate neutralization of inland missile batteries that could rain death on Allied forces? The entire sequence of this high-stakes conflict hinged on that razor-sharp tactical choice. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and love hearing your strategic takes on these battlefield decisions that could change the course of history. While the 82nd Airborne secured the Tonb Islands and Abu Musa in a whirlwind of airborne dominance, the amphibious fist of the U.S. Navy delivered a crushing blow to the theater's most vital target, Karg Island, a 12-square-mile rock that funneled a staggering 90% of Iran's oil export revenue. This was the regime's economic jugular, the lifeblood of their hate-fueled war machine. If the 82nd was the cork sealing the bottle, Karg Island was the bottle itself, and America was about to shatter it. The assault kicked off from the USS Tripoli, a powerful America-class amphibious assault ship carrying the elite 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit 2,500 battle-hardened Marines specialized in lightning-fast island seizures. Supported by the revolutionary MV-22 Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft which blended helicopter vertical takeoff with fixed-wing speed, the Marines launched from over 100 miles offshore, well beyond the reach of Iranian coastal artillery. They transitioned to the target in under 30 seconds, a feat that left defenders scrambling in disbelief. Backing the Ospreys were AH-1Z Viper attack helicopters, the ultimate street fighters of the skies. These deadly birds used their M197 20mm cannons to suppress IRGC ground troops with withering fire, while AGM-114 Hellfire missiles punched through armored vehicles and hardened fuel tanks like a high-velocity sledgehammer. The shaped charge jet from each Hellfire liquefied internal components on impact, creating infernos that lit up the night and symbolized the regime's failed defenses. As the Marines hit the beaches, they deployed LCAC hovercrafts, massive vessels capable of carrying M1A1 Abrams tanks across the water at 40 miles per hour before transitioning directly onto the sand. This gave the US the ability to land heavy armor on 70% of the world's coastlines, compared to just 15% for traditional landing craft. Iranian defenders, spread too thin across the entire island in their panic, couldn't concentrate forces effectively. The 31st MEU exploited this weakness by surging armor straight to the island's most vulnerable point, the massive desalination plants. Karg Island had no natural fresh water, relying entirely on these enormous facilities to sustain its personnel. By securing the plants and the electrical grid in the opening minutes, the Marines created a sustainable occupation that turned the regime's own infrastructure against them. IRGC fighters faced an impossible dilemma: stay and fight while dying of thirst, or surrender and live to see another day. Most chose the latter, their fanatical hatred finally broken by the cold reality of American resolve. The Marines' actions prevented a catastrophic scorched earth disaster that could have sent oil prices skyrocketing and devastated global markets, a doomsday scenario the regime had secretly planned as their ultimate act of spite. But even as the world's eyes fixed on the burning terminals of Karg, a far more perilous and heroic operation unfolded 200 miles inland. The mission secure and extract Iran's nuclear nightmare at Isfahan, where over 440 pounds of uranium enriched to a dangerous 60% purity sat ready for weaponization. This was carried out by the legendary 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta Force and the 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, flying MH-47 Chinook heavy-lift helicopters modified with terrain-following radar and mid-air refueling probes. The Night Stalkers hugged the desert floor at nap of the Earth altitudes, sometimes less than 50 feet above the sand, to evade Iran's internal radar network. Once boots hit the ground, the operators moved like a precision machine, their every step calibrated to extract the uranium stockpiles using specialized shielding containers. Every second counted in this high-wire act that averted a nuclear catastrophe capable of arming terrorists with the ultimate weapon of hate. At the same time, SEAL Team 6 conducted a daring maritime raid on the underground missile bases of Keshem Island. Using underwater delivery vehicles, the SEALs approached the coast undetected and planted C-4 demolition charges on the intake vents of the hidden hangars. If the IRGC attempted a retaliatory launch while Delta Force operated at Isfahan, the SEALs would trigger the charges, sending a massive pressure wave that collapsed the hangar doors and buried the missiles under thousands of tons of rock. This interdependence was pure genius. The SEALs didn't need to win the war alone. They simply cleared the lethal path for their brothers in arms. Green Berets on the ground in neighboring countries, fed real-time intelligence from local networks, tracking every IRGC reinforcement movement. All data flowed back into the kill web where the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye analyzed it instantly and retasked assets with surgical efficiency. Iran was no passive victim in this clash. They responded with desperate, violent fury, born of their long-simmering hatred for American power. The regime unleashed one of the region's most comprehensive asymmetric arsenals, over 2,000 ballistic missiles, including the Sajil Shahab 3 and Fate 110, backed by swarms of cheap Shahed 136 and Mohajer 6 drones, alongside fast attack boats packed with anti-ship missiles. As the 31st MEU tightened its grip on the Karg oil terminal, Iranian radar briefly burned through the jamming and launched a massive counterstrike. Thousands of drones filled the skies like a biblical plague, while mosquito fleets raced across the waves. But America's economic trap snapped shut. To down a $30,000 Shahed 136, the enemy expected multi-million-dollar missiles, yet U.S. forces used smarter tactics. At Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia and Al Dhafra in the UAE Patriot and THAAD batteries, integrated with the E-2D Hawkeye, employed electronic warfare for soft kills, spoofing drone GPS guidance and sending them crashing harmlessly into the sea. When heavy ballistic missiles like the Sajil roared in THAAD, interceptors met them with kinetic fury, punching through warheads in the upper atmosphere before they could threaten U.S. troops or allies. For every dollar Iran poured into their attack, they lost 10 in strategic value, their hatred costing them dearly against America's evolved defenses. The most alarming threat remained the regime's potential scorched earth madness, setting fire to Karg's oil facilities out of pure spite if they couldn't keep them. Such an act would have triggered global energy shockwaves, spiking prices and punishing everyday American families at the pump. But the AH-1Z Vipers and Marine Raiders secured the valves and pumping stations in those critical first minutes, preventing the match from ever being struck. The primary lesson from neutralizing the Strait of Hormuz was crystal clear: firepower is a commodity, but flawless sequence is the ultimate weapon. Iran had poured resources into static defenses on Abu Musa and the Tomes, banking on their ballistic missiles and sea mines to create a no-go zone for any fleet. They built everything to fight ships on the water. America sent an integrated network instead. The IRGC's catastrophic failure stemmed from ignoring sensor-to-shooter latency, their minutes of radio chatter and human hesitation, versus America's seconds of data-linked precision. By the time a commander on Greater Tom reported the 80 seconds jump, his radio was jammed by a Growler and his bunker was already targeted by a GBU-31 JDAM. Iran also grossly underestimated America's economic sustainability. They dreamed of bleeding the U.S. Treasury dry by forcing expensive missiles against cheap drones. They never anticipated electronic warfare evolving to solve the cost per interception problem, fighting them with mere pennies worth of radio waves. The final masterstroke was infrastructure inversion. The regime built desalination plants on Karg to sustain their own forces, but in doing so, created a single point of failure that the 31st MEU turned into a leverage point of surrender. We didn't destroy their army outright, we simply owned the water. As the sun rose over the Persian Gulf in those early days of April 2026, the strategic map of the Middle East had been forever rewritten by American courage and ingenuity. The Tonbi Islands and Abu Musa now served as U.S. logistical hubs, their airfields buzzing with regular rotations of C-17, a Globemaster, 3 transports, and F-35C Lightning II fighters. Karg Island stood firmly under 31st MEU control its oil valves, acting as a strategic throttle on the regional economy. The nuclear material extracted from Isfahan rested securely in a vault stateside, crushing Iran's nuclear ambitions without a single boot on the mainland. The Strait of Hormuz flowed freely, once more protected by a steel ring of U.S. warships and captured island bases. The operation's cost ran into the billions, but the payoff was immeasurable. Continued stability in global energy markets that keeps prices manageable for hardworking American families. Every time you fill your tank and see stable gas prices during international crises, remember the 82nd Airborne and 31st MEU, holding the line on that hot rock in the Middle East. They didn't just win a battle, they preserved peace through strength. The mission log for Operation Epic Fury is now finalized. Data packets from the E-2D have been archived, and the steel ring around the strait stands as a permanent fixture of regional security. The next time you glance at a world map and trace those vital energy lanes, know they aren't protected by words alone. They are guarded by the 18-hour clock of the 82nd Airborne Division and the electronic silence of the EA-18G Growler. The tactical board is clear, objectives secured, and the sequence complete. The watch continues, and America stands ready. What do you think about this extraordinary display of American resolve? Does it make you proud of our military's ability to protect freedom and stability against regimes driven by pure hatred? Share your honest opinions in the comments we read. Everyone and your voice matters in these critical conversations about security strategy and the future we all share. Let's keep the discussion going strong.